Welcome back, everyone. Hope everyone had a great summer. It's Labor Day weekend here, and I'm kind of shooting the intro and then the outro to this video at the same time. And the reason for that is I got started working on my bridge scene, and I decided to do something a little different this time. I wanted to record as I worked, but not kind of be burdened by burden's not the right word. I guess it's a little bit of a slowdown trying to record and talk, and then you ramble, and you don't always record everything right. And, shoot, I screwed that up. So what I'm trying this time is I'm actually going to edit the video and then do a voiceover. And I'll have hopefully a couple different effects. One, it'll hopefully cut out some of the background noise of the dehumidifier and the air conditioning running, which you probably can hear in the background because it's running right now. That was the thought anyway. So the video that I shot over the last about a week and a half or so, is just working on the bridge abutments for the river scene. And then at the very end, I've got a little bit of plaster work. I found out that, well, one, I found out two things actually while working with this plaster. I used this new big tub of, well, USG hobby plaster, which you can get off of their website, plaster.com. It works really well. However, I mixed up a double batch of it and found out that it cures very quickly. Well, it becomes unworkable very quickly, let's put it that way. So a double batch was a bad idea. So I got about halfway into spreading some of it out and realized this isn't going to work. So what I ended up with was a lot of dry material in the mixing bucket. So I wanted to get to the point where I could show you the river bed painted and kind of the next step. However, what this is mostly going to be is the abutments themselves and then a little bit of plaster. So really not a whole lot else to share. So this will be the intro, and then well, there won't be an outro to the video. I'll voice over a thanks for coming kind of thing, but I won't have a video to close it out. So you'll have to let me know what you think of the new format, if you prefer it this way or if you prefer the old way of just rambling on as I work on stuff. So you have to let me know. Alright, well, on to working on the bridge abutments. To start the project off, I went ahead and took some dimensions off the scenery, and what I did here was I used the 0.04 thick styrene sheet that I had. I used that sheet for the backgrounds and other projects. And basically here I'm just trying to get a straight edge on this, and just basically cutting the different panels that I'll need for the different abutments. And just referencing the pink sheet there has the dimensions that I took off of the scenery itself, and getting some rough cuts going here. So I've gone ahead and made all the measurements, and I've got pencil lines drawn in. So I'm switching over to the straight edge in my X-Acto, and I'm going to go ahead and make some scribe lines with the knife edge of the X-Acto blade. And then what I'll do is I'll flip over and use the backside tip, and this method actually removes more material from the styrene, and it's faster than actually cutting with the knife edge, because you're actually removing material so you can get through quicker. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll make a bunch of passes with the backside and then maybe come back with the knife edge itself. If not, what you can do is you can go ahead and snap it out. So you can see I've got one edge cut. Now I'll go ahead and make the other one, doing basically the same thing with the knife edge first, and then come back with the back side of the blade. I repeat this process several times. I went ahead and when I took measurements, I've got different pieces, the front face, the sides, where the bridge actually rests upon, and different pieces like that. So I'm going ahead and just cutting all the pieces at once, and then once I snap them off, the styrene has got a little bit of a lip to it, so I'm just using my sanding stick here and going ahead and taking off the edges. Again, it's a sanding stick, not a file, so it's nice because you don't have to worry about the grain of the cut of a file per se. It's just sanding. So sand every edge off, get it nice and flat, and then move on to the next piece. So I've got the pieces cut for one end, and before I went ahead and glued them together, I wanted to make sure that they fit properly. So I'm just giving a rough fit here. And I've got so these are the top pieces that the bridge will rest on, and then just like the backstop basically. I wanted to make sure that my measurements were correct, and I guess it's sort of a measure twice, cut once. I guess I'm a little bit beyond that, but oh well. So you can see just trying to fit it in, and I think I discovered here that I cut it too tall, which is good, and then the side panels and stuff like that. So wanted to double check the work before I went ahead and glued everything together. So here I'm using the Rite Clamps corner braces that I've talked about in previous videos, but I'll make sure I put a link in. Really helpful. They're just magnetic corner braces that help for squaring things up when you're gluing. In this case, again, I'm using Micromark's same stuff, which is pretty much the same thing as the 10X7R. And it's not actually a glue, it's a methyl ethyl ketone, which basically melts the styrene and causes it to, you're essentially welding the two pieces together. It softens the styrene, and the two pieces will basically kind of form together. It makes for a really strong bond. I really like working with it. It's very fast. However, it doesn't spread very far. It's a very viscous material, but it evaporates quickly. Very, very useful working with styrene. You have to be careful though, it will mar the surface, so on the outside edges, you want to be sure to use it sparingly. I know Micromark sells some very nice needle tip applicators, which I've been thinking about getting for the outside edges, but for now the brush works, and I know that I'll be sanding and filing this once I'm done, so I'll be able to hide any imperfections later. So I actually considered not showing this part, but I thought it was important to note that my dimensions were off, and the whole bridge assembly is sitting probably about 1/8 of an inch too tall here, and I'm making this discovery right now. I don't want to bore you with more cutting, but this is the second abutment being cut. So I've got all the dimensions, and I think, corrected at this point because I know that the other abutment was off. So I went back and remeasured just to make sure that this abutment didn't suffer the same fate as the other one. I was able to modify it, and everything's good, but the old adage of measure twice, cut once, yeah, I should have probably done that. So here I am using the Rite Clamps. Well, actually, I just finished, but you can see it holds everything nice and square while you're going ahead and applying the welder, the plastic welder or glue. Nothing fancy here. I would have liked to have braced those inside corners, which I probably should have done, but I figured once everything was built and then in place on the layout, all the pieces would be held in place by the scenery itself. So this wasn't a supporting structure per se, so I didn't really brace the inside corners. Normally I would have done that on a structure, but again, the scenery will take care of a lot of that. So once again, a quick test fit, and I realized that the plaster cloth that I laid down was kind of impeding placing the abutment in its place. So go ahead and just trim that out with an old steak knife. It's come in handy quite a bit. It's good for carving styrofoam and apparently for cutting plaster cloth. So the pier that I looked forward to the most to model was actually the center pier. And again, I'm loosely modeling the Black Bridge in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. And the piers have a angle on three sides, and then on the leading edge side that goes, well, upriver, I guess, so the water flows towards it. It actually has an angle on it, almost like a wedge. And I wasn't sure what that was for, and then YouTube user QNE Railroad, I wish I knew his real name, I could give him more kudos, but he pointed out that it actually is probably more of an ice-breaking type structure. Being in Wisconsin, I'm sure that the Wisconsin River sees quite a bit of ice, and so this may help protect the abutment from ice breaking against it. So again, it's loosely based on it. If you look at the actual piers, it's more of a sharp edge, as if it was a wedge, where I ended up making it not quite a wedge, but again, I'm freelancing here, so it works for my purposes. So what I decided to do here is here's the angle, the leading edge angle. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just put a couple scribe lines down and basically break the styrene without actually breaking it completely. Just to kind of give it a break point, like you do with a piece of sheet metal. And so I run a razor blade down it a few times, just give it a little bend. And it does snap a little, but it's still connected, so I don't have to, I can still apply some of the plastic welder here, and but it'll be a little bit stronger of a joint. So I'm going to do that the same thing on both sides, and then that way the ends will meet, and then I can just place a triangular shaped piece in the to fill in the wedge itself. So you can see, because this is a standalone structure, I can actually brace the inside of this one. So I'm just using scrap pieces of styrene here, throwing them into the corners just to give it a little extra strength. in theory, this structure is going to be a little bit of a weight-bearing structure um, because the bridges, and then as the trains pass over, obviously it's going to hold up. Don't have to worry about that, but wanted to give it a little extra bracing. So here I've gone ahead and cut the triangular wedge piece that I'm going to go ahead and put on the front of the abutment. And that'll end up being what it looks like once it's applied. Not exactly like the prototype, but again, kind of freelancing a little bit here. Still gives it a unique look and gets close to the prototype. The prototype itself looks like it has a actual cap on top of it of a slightly larger piece of concrete. So what I'm going ahead and doing here is just adding some strip styrene that I cut to fit around the top of it to kind of simulate the cap itself. So little modeler's license here. And in a second I'll realize I should be using my miter box that I have, which is sitting off to my left there. But for some reason I'm just freehanding it here. Here's a shot of the completed structure, and got the cap all glued in place, and it's ready to test fit on the layout at this point. So here's everything. I went ahead and took some Krylon for plastics, primer, light primer gray. Went ahead and sprayed all of them. And again, I really like the Krylon spray paints for a base coat, especially for concrete. It gives it a little bit of a texture. And as you know, concrete is kind of a porous, especially in a poured concrete like this. So I like the texture that it gives. So I went ahead and sprayed everything a light coat of gray, and then we'll start the painting process. What I've gone ahead and done here is I've taken some of my Vallejo paint, which is an Iraqi sand color. I've mixed it with a little bit of darker brown color and a little bit of green. And I'm taking some sponges, they're cosmetic wedges, and I'm just basically dabbing everything onto it. So again, to give it a little bit of texture and give it a base coat. So I'm just giving everything a base coat of this tan color. It's a little bit more brown than I would have liked. I would have liked more of a gray, but I think in the end the results turn out okay. So what I'm doing here is with a cosmetic wedge, I've dipped it in the a little bit of a wash that I have over on the back side there, And just with water, I'm drawing down on the painted surfaces and kind of removing some of the tan that I applied, which is revealing the gray underneath. And this is kind of hiding the brown and tan color and bringing out the gray a little bit. So what I've done here is I've used a little bit of flat black, and I have applied some splotches with another cosmetic wedge, and then I remove a little bit of it again with the wet sponge. And here what I'm doing is to simulate moss growth. I've got some green that I'm applying with a brush and kind of going on quite heavily in the cracks and corners, and then kind of where maybe the water line would be towards the bottom. And then again coming back with the wet sponge and just drawing down to kind of drown it or thin it a little bit. Just so you see a faint, a little bit of green in there, not a lot, but just that moss might have grown there, or algae, or depending on, again, where the water was. It's a little hard to see, but I thought the results turned out okay. Here's a better shot of what I'm doing with the black. So I applied some of the black to the sponge, and then I just dab it on in areas, and then come back with the wet sponge and just remove some of it, which, and again, drawing down, obviously gravity will draw water down and dirt and everything that comes with it. So just kind of lightly dabbing it down, get rid of some of the black, and just gives it a tarnished look. I know all of a sudden we're finished and the bridge abutments are in place, but test fitting them here, colored and everything with the bridges on top of them, and so this is how it is so far. So I mentioned at the top of the video that I did do some plaster work, and you can see here I'm going ahead and I'm spraying the plaster cloth with water. You want to spray any plaster that you already have down with water. Otherwise, what will happen is the plaster you have down will draw moisture out of the plaster you're applying over the top of it, and the new plaster will not dry. It'll actually it'll crack instead of drying properly and getting a nice surface. You'll end up with a lot of cracks. So you just spray it down and then come in and start applying your plaster. When you're getting a great shot of the OxyClean box here, bucket here instead of what I'm doing, I'm just spreading it out with a spatula. But as I mentioned, unfortunately, I made too big a batch and it started to cure in the container, and I shouldn't have shot for the moon here, should have went a little bit smaller. Well, this is about the end of the video, what I've got done for now. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Again, this is a little bit of a different methodology for me here, shooting a voiceover instead of doing the talking as I work. But we'll see how it turns out in the end. If you guys like it, let me know. If you don't like it, let me know, and we'll go from there. But here I'm trying to get the plaster just smoothed out a little bit and in place. So more of that to come, and thanks a lot for subscribing, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next video.